He's known as the father of Australian ornithology, having catalogued the continent's feathered inhabitants when it was still being charted by explorers. John Gould also lent his name to the Gould League, which saw thousands of children introduced to the beauty of bird life. But an astute business mind lay behind his famous artworks. And a new book published by the National Library explains how the English naturalist and his artist wife made their fortune.
Gould was the son of a gardener. He didn't come from the aristocracy or the upper middle classes of Britain in his time. He was of humble origins, but he was always, in later life, he reflected on his early love of animals. Gardeners also had sidelines in things like taxidermy, and they used to stuff animals and things like that, and he very quickly became an adept at stuffing animals. And in fact, his father was working in a property near Eton College, and he used to sell the schoolboys of Eton stuffed animals and birds for their own little private collections.
John Gould was genuinely and deeply passionate about the natural world, but he also had a natural flair for business. The Business of Nature by Rosalind Russell charts his journey from gardener's son to famed stalwart of scientific discovery and documentation. After learning skills by his father's side, the young John Gould was springboarded into a career that would take him around the world.
And by very good fortune met a lady who was as keen on natural history as he was.
That woman was Elizabeth Coxon, later to become Gould's wife and colleague.
As a governess, she'd been taught the accomplishments that young ladies were, and she could draw. And John decided that he would branch out from stuffing animals into actually depicting them and using the new technique of lithography. And Elizabeth was his first artist, because he was not himself a particularly good artist. He was a very good observer. He was an extraordinary capacity for noting the characteristics of animals and birds, and he would do a rough sketch and then have it translated into the beautiful high quality prints that were required for natural history illustration. She was clearly as committed to his vision of what they could do together. She did it when she was expecting babies, she did it after she lost babies, things like that.
And she did it at the furthest corners of the earth. Gould travelled to Australia at the insistence of Charles Darwin.
Darwin had used John's services with some of the taxonomic work on the birds he brought back from the Galapagos Islands, the finches that were so crucial to Darwin's theory of evolution. Obviously said to him, look, there's a rich field of endeavour in Australia and you should go there.
Gould travelled far and wide to observe animals in their natural surroundings, taking notes not just on what they looked like, but how they behaved. No detail went unnoticed.
He would accompany explorers. He accompanied Sturt on some of his expeditions around the Murray area. He also went out into the back blocks of Tasmania. She didn't go on those expeditions. She stayed, at this point, she was expecting another child, and she was actually staying in Government House in Hobart as a guest of Lady and Franklin and Sir John Franklin. And so she would stay put, and John went on expeditions actually with Lady Franklin right down to the west coast of Tasmania to try and look at the remote areas of Tasmania. So it was a pretty wild place.
It was hard, time-consuming work, and Gould was an exacting master. But it was a profitable venture in an era when there was a thirst for new discoveries and natural curiosities back home in Europe. The final product was a stunning series of volumes documenting the birds and animals of Australia. Each image was delicately illustrated by hand and then coloured by a team of artists. There was only ever one edition, and they were subscribed to before publication, making them highly anticipated and rather rare.
They certainly were a luxury item, but they were the kinds of things that you would have if you were a well-to-do member of the aristocracy or the upper middle classes who was interested in natural history, and many of these people were. They had their own cabinets of curiosities, their own little private museums and zoos. This would be another item that you would show to your friends when they came for dinner. You didn't show a video or a DVD, you brought out your treasures, you brought out your collection or your beautiful prints. So they would have been a prestige item.
Gould's work made him wealthy. His business now was applied to every aspect of the project. He even sold off the stuffed birds he'd used as models after he was finished with them. What the couple left behind was a record that to this day remains a strikingly accurate account of Australian wildlife.
This could be the honey eater that sits on my callistum in my backyard. It's so lifelike, it's so true. To emerge at the other end was something that someone here in the 21st century can say, that looks like the bird in my backyard.
Siobhan Heanue with that story. And thanks to the Gold Creek Aviary for letting us spend some time with their birds. We'll see a bit more of them at the end of the program.